Hey VC members, it's Matt, and thought I would check in and do a video. I was watching videos earlier today, and there's something going around called the Vinyl Tag 2018, which asks 20 questions, and I've already seen 3 or 4 people have responded to it, so I thought I would jump in and give it a whirl myself. So we'll just get right into it. The first question is, do you remember the first VC video you ever saw? And thanks for asking. As a matter of fact, I do. It would have been, I was aware of YouTube, but I hadn't really paid much attention to it one way or the other. I had gone on there because I knew there were some promos and videos there were still Beatle videos on there back then, and the Kinks and the Rolling Stones. So I'd watch some of those. I knew people went on YouTube and made videos of their cats playing piano or their kid falling off a swing or something like that, but didn't have much interest in that. But on Record Store Day of 2012, actually the Black Friday version of Record Store Day, went and bought my records, and coming home for some reason just happened to think, I wonder if people go on and make videos about what they got for Record Store Day, because when you're at the store and you're in line, people will be visiting and talking about what they're hoping to get, and then after they get their stuff, they'll be showing off their records to each other. So I wondered about that and went on YouTube and looked around, and turns out that there were, and so that would have been that day, November, whatever that is, day after Thanksgiving, 2012, and I found a guy whose VC channel name was Sun Dodger. His actual name is Gary, and he was showing, he'd gone to the record store that day wherever he lives and was showing off what he bought. And just from looking around, there were other videos, other people who had done the same thing, showed what they bought that day for Record Store Day. And then I was looking and saw that Gary and these other people had additional videos that were just showing, records that they bought, not necessarily Record Store Day stuff, or showing their collection, talking about albums, doing album reviews. So that's what got me into it. Unfortunately, Gary doesn't really make videos anymore. He's still on Facebook, but he made some really good videos. And from Gary, I quickly found Mr. Hall of Fame Brandon, Derek, Mean Mr. Mayo, Bobby Z, Adam 80s, and a bunch of people from there. A bunch of people that made some really good videos that just sort of disappeared over the years, unfortunately, like Gary. But so yeah, would have been 2012, around November. Favorite record discovered through the VC? I really couldn't think of anything, and the only thing that came to mind, this is a 45 by this X Hex band, which is not anything spectacular, but it's a pretty good little 45. And learned about this. There used to be a girl on the VC. I can't remember her name now. She was young. I think she was in high school, first year of college or so. Had kind of short, curly, brunette hair. Her screen name I never could pronounce. It was like Chisarick or Chisarak. She made really good videos. She had kind of the same taste in music as I do, 60s stuff, and then this new wave punk stuff, and 80s and so forth. So she showed a lot of really cool records. This was something that she had picked up. She actually got a job in a record store, and she talked about this and played part of one of the songs, and I thought it sounded good, so I picked up a copy of it. I think this is a limited edition thing, and I don't know if this band's even around or not. This would have been from around still or not. This would have been probably 2012, 2013. The Chisarek, whatever girl, unfortunately quit making videos, which was a shame because she made some really good ones. But that's really all I could think of. What are your hobbies other than music? Well, I like reading. I like movies. I like architecture. Old buildings and old houses is a big fascination of mine. History stuff. I like going to art museums and looking at statues and paintings and junk like that. And college football, I'm a huge college football fan. So TCU, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, I like them. And some other teams I really get into college football. And that's about it. I guess I could say I like writing, but I work for a newspaper, so it's kind of my job. I don't know if that's a hobby. But number 4 is, why did you start collecting records? Well, because I like music, I guess, and because when I started, I would have been about 8 or 9, and it would have been 1973, and so you didn't have CDs back then. You had albums and 8-track tapes, and I guess cassettes, maybe. I'm not sure if those were even around at that point, but just kind of uh, got my musical taste from my older brothers, who were quite a bit older than me, and so they liked the Beatles and the 60s stuff, and I just sort of naturally grew into that and started buying and collecting records back then when I was a little kid, with allowance money, or when I could beg my parents to buy me an album. Um, do you play an instrument, or are you in a band? No, I do not either. Not in a band. Don't know how to play anything. I wish I did. It'd be cool to know how to play guitar, piano, or really anything, but I don't. A friend of mine used to be really good. He could play bass, guitar, piano, and he showed me a few things on guitar and bass, just little opening bits of a couple of songs that I've probably long since forgotten. So, but I don't play anything. I wish I did. Did you ever work in a record store? Not specifically, no, but I did back in the 80s. I was the manager of a video rental store called Take It Home that was in Fort Worth, and they had about 9 or 10 stores around the Fort Worth area. And I managed one of those, and the owner of the store the store opened, I want to say 83 or so, but round about late 85, early 86, the store owner decided to start selling compact discs, which were a pretty new thing at that point, in addition to renting videos. So the store sold compact discs for, I don't know, 2 or 3 years. I didn't work there that whole time, but he knew that I was a big music nut, so he put me in charge of ordering the CDs for the 9 stores. And so I guess in a roundabout way, I sort of kind of did work at a record store. Favorite album from the year you were born? That would be 1963, and it's not really much of a contest. There's some other good albums that came out in 1963, but obviously, uh, okay, classic record you've not heard, and a couple of people whose videos I watched today picked this album, Karsten Olsen and another someone else I can't remember now, went blank, but King Crimson, the is it In the Court of King Crimson, the debut album with the guy screaming on the cover. I've always seen that, and I've never heard it. Maybe I've heard a song or two somewhere, but I've never heard the album that I know of. It's one of those that I'm not sure that it's something that I would particularly like, but one of these days I'll give it a listen just to find out. So that's one of the classic records I've never heard. What's your guilty pleasure? I really know how to answer that question, because I don't. I like what I like, and if people think it's goofy or good or bad or in between, I don't really care. So I don't consider anything to be a guilty pleasure. But as far as records that most people would, I guess, consider to be guilty pleasures, I don't really have anything like the Partridge Family or the Osmonds or Britney Spears or Justin Bieber or any of that stuff in my collection, just because I don't particularly like any of that stuff. The closest I can think of is I have an iPod, which I guess still works. It's over there. I haven't played it in probably 2 or 3 years, but on there I've got 2 Mandy Moore songs, which both of them are covers. Stupid Cupid, which I think was originally a Connie Francis song, if I'm not mistaken, and Drop the Pilot, which I don't know if that's Joni Mitchell or Joan Baez or something originally did that. So both those songs, just covers, are pretty good songs. I like her as an actress. I've heard her other regular music. It's not really my cup of tea, but I always kind of liked her because you see her in interviews and in movies, and she seems to have a little bit of common sense as opposed to most of the empty-headed pop stars around nowadays. Strangest record you have, and I wish I still had these. I don't. I've got one I'm going to show here, but I remember going through my parents' record collection when I was a little kid and kind of got a laugh out of seeing in there with all the Bing Crosby and Frank Sinatra and kind of movie soundtracks for South Pacific and things like that. They had a Desi Arnaz, Ricky Ricardo record, which I thought was kind of funny. And the other thing they had, which I kept, and I don't have it anymore, I don't know, somewhere along the way it got lost or whatever, but was a Singer sewing machine record, which was from back in the 60s or so, I guess. And so I guess my mom, I remember her having a sewing machine, and I guess it was a singer, however. Can't remember if it's SIN or SAN. But I guess when she bought it, it came with a record, and I played the thing, and it's just some guy, sort of a congratulations on the purchase of your new Singer sewing machine. You're sure to get hours of sewing pleasure out of it, and then just sort of went through the parts of the machine and how to use it. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but I thought that was kind of funny. But the one that I've got this for 50 cents at a garage sale a few years ago. I like Christmas music. I've got like 50, 60 Christmas albums. Kate Smith, I have no idea who she is. And this album is actually it's from 1966, but I just thought it was a funny cover. The lady, to me, looks a lot like Hyacinth or the Bucket Woman from the British comedy Are You Being Served, which I like a lot. And so for 50 cents, I figure I couldn't go wrong. She's got kind of a big, bold, brassy voice. I've only played this maybe once or twice. Not exactly my cup of tea, but I guess it's all right for what it is. It's just Christmas songs. But I had shown this to my mom, and she knew who this lady was. So I guess back in the day, this is a singer that had hits that were the kind of things your parents would listen to back in the 50s and 60s or whatever. But yeah, this doesn't get a whole lot of play. Okay. Show a picture disc. Well, I only have two. I used to have a whole bunch of them, and the only one I looked through my record collection, one of them's in there somewhere, but I got tired of looking. But so Joe Strummer one side, Jones on the other, The Clash. This is an interview with the band, and I got this back in the 80s, somewhere back there. Had it forever. I don't think I've actually ever played this, so maybe I ought to pull it out and play it. I know picture discs don't have the greatest sound quality just for being an interview. Probably should give it a listen sometimes. And somewhere in there I've got another one that's a picture of Bruce Springsteen, and it's an interview disc also. Back in the 70s and 80s, I used to have a whole lot for the Beatles, and had a little Go-Go's 45 and a couple of Rolling Stones and so forth, but I sold them, I guess. Your favorite posthumous release? I'm going to go, and I don't know, it's George Harrison's Brainwashed, which came out, I think, the year after he passed away, but and unfortunately didn't get a whole lot of sales or airplay, which is a shame because it's one of his better albums. It's actually a really solid, really good album, and some great songs. It's nice to have this on vinyl too because it's pretty hard to find on vinyl nowadays. But yeah, in his top 5 or so of his albums. So, what do you impulsively collect? Well, the Beatles, basically, and through the years, there's been Kinks, Rolling Stones, The Doors, and just a bunch of people. But through the span of most of my life, the Beatles would be the main. Your best blind buy, and I've talked about this woman quite a few times, Lydia Lovelace, and there's a big old glare, so it's hard to see that album cover. There's the back, you can see that a little bit better. I'm not a big fan of new music over the last 30 years or so, but she's one of the exceptions. This is an incredible album. She's really good and worth checking out, and I get emails from places that sell records or record labels, and back in 2013, 14, this came out in 14, I got an email from Bloodshot Records, which is her label, and just on, I usually just delete those, but for some reason, just on impulse, I clicked over, and I had read, well, it says here, is Stevie Nicks singing lead on Born to Run overstating it? Probably, but too bad. And there were some other glowing reviews, and I thought, well, it's probably crap. But on impulse, I went over to the site, listened to some songs, and thought, hey, this is really good. And I got the album, and I've got all of her albums. She's really good. She's really worth checking out. If you're one of those people like me that thinks there hadn't been any good music since the mid 80s, pretty much there hadn't, but there are a few exceptions, and she's one of them. Definitely worth checking out. And that album is probably the best of her releases, even though all of them are good. Okay, blind spot artist. What I take this to be, because some people in the videos I've seen have been not exactly sure what that question means, but what I'm taking it to be is a band or an artist that everyone seems to love that you just don't get. There's a ton of them. I could go on forever. I'm not going to do that, but I'll just say Fleetwood Mac. I don't hate them. I'm not running them down for anyone who likes them, and I know that band had several iterations of different members at different times, from the 60s up through the 70s and 80s and on, and so they're really kind of like 4 or 5 different bands just from having different people in them at different times. But everything I've heard of them, and I haven't heard all of it, the early albums or anything, but especially Rumors, which was a huge album back when I was in 7th, 8th grade, I just didn't get the appeal to me. It's just a really boring group. Uh, Not a terrible group, just a dull group, but a lot of people seem to rate them, and that's great. If you like them, that's great, but I just never saw the appeal. Favorite album cover, this was in a Joe Mean Mr. Mayo contest here just the other day, and I picked a John Coltrane album, but there's so many that I could pick. I didn't want to show that one again. So I'll show, I always got a kick out of this, and it's one of my favorite albums of theirs too. Probably my second favorite album of theirs actually, but just always liked that one. And, well, actually I'll do a bonus. I'll do 3. Always enjoyed the cover of this, and this is one of my favorite George albums too, Wonderwall Music by Harrison. So you get a couple of Harrison albums in there. Actually you get more because you got the Beatles. And it's in my favorite Who album, but it's a pretty good one, but I always did really love that cover. And the only thing I thought was you can see the members of the band in the mirrors on the motorbikes there. The album is supposed to be about the mod days of 64, 65, so I think they probably should have put pictures of the band members from 65 instead of the 1973 pictures in there maybe. But I always really loved that cover, thought it was really cool. That cover's not bad either. And so the inside's not as exciting, but I always thought that was a great cover. Good album, not my favorite of theirs, but a musician that you've met. Well, I went and saw the White Stripes in 2000 when 2000 or 201, whenever White Blood Cells came out, right before they got big, but were just about to get big, and they played in a little club in Dallas. And so a friend of mine went with me, and we were walking down the street because we got there early looking for somewhere to eat, and we look over and there's Jack White sitting on a bench outside eating a hot dog. And so we hung around with them and talked to them for a while, and they had an opening band, and they were just sort of walking around the club talking to people and hanging out, so I got to hang out with them. And that's the only that I can think of that I actually spent any time per se with. Used to be a great place to see concerts called Bronco Bowl in Dallas. It was actually a bowling alley with a concert hall attached to it. It only seated about 1,000, so it was a great place to see a show. Not a bad seat in the house. And this would have been, it was around way back in the day, but in the 80s, early 80s, we went and saw shows there. It's a lot of fun, and this was when MTV was kind of first starting and was still good before it got awful. The original MTV VJs, the Martha Quinn and Nina Blackman and the 2 guys and whatever, would often show up to introduce the bands. Saw a lot of new wave punk rock bands there. Saw the Go-Go's, saw the Clash, saw the Pretenders a couple of times, and actually saw U2 there, which not a band I really liked, but saw them when War came out, so it was right before they got big, and was a pretty good show, even though I'm not a big fan of theirs, but saw a bunch of bands. And so you could go around the back of the building, and the tour bus would be back there, and the the band would have to come out that way, and so people would go back there and get pictures, get autographs, and say hi to them. So got to meet the Clash, got to meet Chrissie Hynde, the Animals in '83 got back together and did a reunion album and did a tour, all the original members. So got to meet all, 5 or 6 members of that band and had them sign a program that I bought. So, but that's about it. Um, nobody really elsewise. Album with sentimental value. This was, like I said, my brothers are quite a bit older than me, and so this is a beat up copy of Revolver from you can see it, from 1966. So this would have been an album that one of my brothers bought when it's brand new, and I sort of, let's just say borrowed a lot of their records when I was about 9 or 10 back in 1973, and have not gotten around to returning them yet, and this is one of them. The album actually plays pretty well. I don't play this copy anymore, but so that's just kind of neat to have an album from 1966 when the thing came out, and would have been neat to have been old enough. I would have been 2, almost 3, so I didn't go out and buy it, but would have been neat to have been old enough to go out and buy Beatle records when they were brand new. The other album, and I haven't played this thing in probably 20 years, for sentimental value, and I got this in for Christmas in 1979, and it's got some. I mean, it's got Jimi Hendrix, it's got Sly and the Family Stone, and Jefferson Airplane, and the rest of the stuff on here is just okay. It's never been a huge favorite of mine. I always thought Monterey Pop was the better big music festival than Woodstock, but the reason that has sentimental value is that in '79 for Christmas I got that gift wrapped with 5 or 6 other albums, and they were gifts from my mom, which was pretty neat because I don't remember that I would have been like 10th grade, so 9th or 10th grade, and so I don't remember that I gave her a list of albums I was wanting for Christmas or what, but she somehow knew what I wanted, and this is not the kind of music that she would have been interested in at all. She was, like I said, Sinatra, Bing Crosby, that sort of music. So, but just means a lot that at the time I was a kid, I didn't think about it. It was just Christmas gifts, yay. But thinking about it now, just, that she actually took the time to go to record stores and track down that and other albums that she knew that I would want. So that, coming from her. Album 19th is, number 19 is album you like that no one knows about. I don't know if no one on here knows about, but I'm a big Richard Thompson fan. Shoot Out the Lights, this is 1982 release. He was in Fairport Convention, and he and his wife Linda made records together through the 70s into the 80s, and they split up, and he's made solo albums since then. Just an incredible guitarist, really good songwriter, pretty good vocalist. She's a really good vocalist though, and this Fairport Convention albums are really great. But solo wise, or released with his wife, this is probably his best album. Came out in 1982, like I said, but if you heard this, you would probably, it doesn't sound 80ish at all. Sounds like something that early to mid 70s album, but really worth checking out if you've never heard him, and worth going on. Just go YouTube the title track for a listen, or yeah, everything on here is good. So it's a great album, worth checking out. And the other one, great band that was around in the late 70s, early 80s, Magazine, that should be a household name band, but unfortunately they're not. They made 3 incredible albums, and 4th album was pretty good. And then they made a reunion album, I want to say 2011, that's really good. But their first album. The first three albums are just essential listening, and just a great band that more people should know about, but unfortunately don't seem to. Album from a genre that you don't know very well. Well, I'm not a country western music fan by any means of the word. Nothing against it. It's just not my cup of tea. But for some reason, I do like Jimmy Rogers, the singing brakeman, who was a guy that was around back in the 20s. And I do like a few Johnny Cash songs. Uh, but this was a record store day purchase from, I don't know, 2013, 12, somewhere in there. And I don't know who Charlie Poole is or if he and his band made other records, but this is their complete recordings from 1929. And it's just sort of if you ever seen the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Sort of that kind of music, kind of corny stuff, but fun stuff. And for some reason, even though I don't like country music at all, this just does it for me. So I really enjoy that. That is the extent of the questions, and I hope to see other people join in and like to watch their answers. And hope everyone's having a good time. And that's it. Oh, turn it off here.